Or good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us, the National Council of Faculty Senates, today for our webinar, Sustaining Participation in Shared Governance. Before I turn this over to our moderator, Amber Rossner, who is at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and our panelists, Joey Velasco at Sul-Ross and the Texas Council of Faculty Senates, and Bonnie Ownley at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, I would like to give a definition of shared governance. The definition that I use is that of AAUP, and it is the following. Quote, shared governance, according to the association's statement on government of colleges and universities, refers to the responsibility shared among the different components of the institution, governing boards, administrations, and faculties for its governance and the specific areas of primary responsibility for each component. The part that speaks to us and our concern is the following. And I quote, the role of the faculty is to have primary responsibility for such fundamental areas as curriculum, subject matter, and methods of instruction, research, faculty status, and those aspects of student life which relate to the educational process. The responsibility for faculty status includes appointments, reappointments, decisions not to reappoint, promotions, the granting of tenure, and dismissal. And then the AEP very helpfully adds, why should the faculty voice be authoritative in the academic area? Faculty are distinctly qualified to exercise decision-making authority in their areas of expertise. The faculty's judgment is central to general educational policy, and scholars in a particular field of activity have the chief competence for judging that work and the work of their colleagues. With that as a definition to give us perhaps an even playing field, I would like to thank all of you for attending. The session today is being recorded. It will be put up on our website, which I will put these links in the chat very soon. And you will be receiving an email on Monday morning with a link to this so that everyone who was here and wants to share this or was unable to attend will be able to hear it. Also, as one reminder before I hand it over, our annual meeting will be held on June 5th and 6th at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. We look forward to seeing you there. And now I'll turn things over to Amber, Joey, and Bonnie.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction, Gwen. So I am so happy to be here with you all today as your secretary for NCFS, and am even more excited to moderate a session that's near and dear to my heart, the idea of sustaining interest and engagement and participation in shared governance. As Gwen noted, I think we all here must have gotten hooked on shared governance, and I got hooked on shared governance based in an invitation to be involved from a colleague that I admired very much at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Candace White, who I believe worked with Bonnie, who is a past president at the University of Tennessee. And so at that point, and with that maybe awkward segue, I don't know, I am going to turn it over to Bonnie, who will share a little bit about her lived experience with shared governance and what keeps her involved.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Amber. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me to join you in this conversation. So a little bit about me. I'm a plant pathologist. Plant pathologists have to do with shared governance. I guess over the years, I became interested in some decisions administrators were making and were not considering the perspectives of faculty and students. And that's how I first got involved. And after that, I was asked to run as an officer in faculty senate, and I've been doing that in various roles for the past several years. I want to share with you first what my concept of shared governance is, and it was very similar to Gwen's because it all comes out of AAUP. So let me see if I can put this on the screen. I think I'm sharing and I will go into presentation mode here. Okay, are you able to see just one slide on the screen?
Yes, yes.
Great. So my concept of shared governance comes from an article written a few years back by Gary Olson. Exactly what is shared governance, and that's a good article. It's in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Basically, these are the bullet points that have guided me. Everyone has a role, and that's important. But shared governance doesn't mean that everyone gets to participate at every stage. For example, I mean, this is not, shared governance doesn't mean everyone gets a vote. So let me give you an example using how we select faculty candidates. You have a search committee of faculty, and they're going to evaluate the applicants. And they'll select a short list of candidates, and they'll conduct preliminary interviews. They'll contact references. They'll choose a group of finalists to invite to campus. They'll solicit input about the candidates from appropriate stakeholders. And they'll determine which of the finalists are acceptable. Then it moves on to the next level. It's up to the final decision maker, who will be an administrator, is responsible for conducting background checks and entering into formal negotiations with the front runner. And ultimately, the decision maker is the one who is held responsible for the success or failure of that appointment. And that's one thing we don't talk about very much. Once that decision is made, you have to have accountability. And it's much easier to hold an individual accountable than it is to hold a group accountable. The second bullet is that no single constituency will exercise complete control over the process. A search cannot be a simple matter of a popular vote, because someone must remain accountable for that final decision. The next bullet is that no one person arbitrarily makes important decisions without the advice of key constituents. And I know that you've probably experienced this. When this sort of thing happens, it's usually not enough viewpoints were considered in order for a good decision to be made. And that's part of the value of shared governance, getting as many opinions as you can. And as I said earlier, decision-making is not simply a function of group vote. You need various stakeholders to participate in well-defined parts of the process. And this goes back, in order to promote shared governance, you have to practice it at every level. So what are you doing in your own departments? Are you practicing shared governance at the department level? Here at the University of Tennessee, we have been looking at shared governance practices at the department level, and we found that some of them do not allow their non-tenure track faculty to vote in faculty decisions, or they have a system set up where they get only a portion of the vote as compared to tenure faculty. So that's, to me, that's not practicing shared governance. So in order for it to work, shared governance, you have to have broad and unending communication. Communication is the key. And if your university is anything like mine, communication has never really been a strong suit at the university between different groups. So this is something you have to practice and continually try to improve. The other thing with communication is when you tell people what's going on, even if they don't particularly like it, they're, I think they'll take into account that at least they're being kept into the loop, and they can understand developments that are occurring within the university. But the thing that's really important is to invite them to participate as true partners. And in that situation, that's when the university or the institution is going to make real strides and very good decisions. And that's the common goal. And one of the problems we have is getting faculty to engage in shared governance. So what do we know about faculty? They're all individuals. They have high expectations. They're skeptical of authority. They're trained to be critical thinkers. And when you have people like that, it does cause conflict with administration because they're not used to being told that perhaps their decisions aren't the good ones. But when you have people like faculty, you also know that you have people who are able to make really good decisions and maybe see the flaws in some of the decisions coming up. So the next thing that as a leader, what you're going to have to think about is, what does it take to lead? You have to be persuasive. You have to mobilize influence. You have to learn how to manage conflict. And it's very important to be able to negotiate and at some point to accept compromise. So I can stop at that point, and I can give you later on as we have a conversation some of the examples that we have had of shared governance, the good, the bad, the ugly, and just question marks. Is this really going to work? We have great examples of that here.
Thank you so very much, Bonnie. I think that's always a nice place to end on a point of about compromise, because sometimes that's necessary in the worlds that we operate in. Joey, I would love to now turn the floor over to you. I want to hear about your lived experience. How did you get hooked on shared governance, and what do you have to share with us today?
All right. Thank you, Amber, and thank you, Bonnie, for your comments. It's good to get to know you, and thank you, Gwen, for helping set this up, and thank you to the National Council of Faculty Senates for this opportunity for all of us. So I'm speaking to you from Texas, West Texas, from a small public university named Sul Ross State University, but I want to make clear that I'm not representing Sul Ross State University in any way in my comments today, but I am the president of the Texas Council of Faculty Senates, and that's a federation of statewide faculty governance leaders. And through that organization, and through 2 meetings a year, we're able to take stock of the climate in Texas on higher education. But I didn't start there, so let's go back to the beginning. So in 2005, I became a faculty member at Sul Ross, and I wasn't even tenure track. I have tenure now, and I got involved with our local faculty assembly. Is what it's called. It's not a faculty senate, so it's not a representative body. Because we have a smaller faculty, we actually have a structure that allows more participation, because we could actually fit everyone in one room, around 100 faculty members. So started going to these meetings, and one of my mentors had been the faculty assembly president. He was now the dean, and encouraged me to keep participating in committees and councils. But I didn't really get what we were doing. I thought we were just trying to help the everyday functions of the university and helping out. And I didn't really understand the concept of shared governance for a while. I did hear it a couple times, but not much on my campus. So we really didn't have a culture of shared governance. The climate, I didn't really come up in a climate of deep shared governance heritage and idea sharing on shared governance. And so with that, I struggled to see exactly the place of what the work we were doing on our campus in terms of our committees and councils. And I say those both because those are the 2 different teamwork structures that we have in terms of who has ownership of the the membership and accountability. Where does it point to? So the councils come from the faculty governance organization, and the committees are owned by the president's office, basically, and the membership is populated by them. So I saw the interplay between councils and committees, and I was curious about all that, and kept participating. I was someone who kept volunteering for committees, and at some point I started getting leaned on more for leadership opportunities, to chair committees, and then to come up through to be part of the executive council of that faculty governance organization. So I served as secretary treasurer for a couple of terms, and then I was asked to run for president. I served 2 terms, so 4 years of being president of the faculty assembly. And it was around that time, so about 8 years after I started participating in committees and councils, I started attending the Texas Council of Faculty Senate's meetings. So we would meet in Austin twice a year, and we would report to, well, a room full of faculty governance leaders that represent the majority of the public university faculty leadership in Texas. And these are meetings that are also attended by other organizations like the AAUP. And it was at those meetings that I first saw this book being held up. And so some of you probably don't know what this is. That's okay. We have a diverse audience that with your different experiences with shared governance, and you might be part of a union, you might be in a state that allows unions, you might be part of the AAUP, you might come to National Council of Faculty Senates through lots of different ways, and you might be attending this meeting because somebody tapped you and said, "Hey, maybe you should go to this." So just to let you know, the book I just held up is a sampling of key readings from the American Association of University Professors. It's over a centuries old organization. It began in 1915 by the Committee of 15 to really establish principles to guide higher education. And if all the principles and policy documents and reports were printed in this book, the stack would be really high. So you can find more of these on the AEP.org website. But really, for over a century, a lot of higher education organizations have established that these policy documents and reports really are the gold standard for how to run higher education. So I came to learn about these guiding principles, and I finally had a flashlight and a compass to guide some of the work that I was already doing, but I needed to see the full big picture of the purpose. And so this is where I really started to come to understand shared governance, and also see the implications for when it's not going well and when it's thriving. And consequently, the universities that tend to be thriving by lots of different measures tend to have strong shared governance as embodied by policy, but also a culture of collaboration across administration and faculty. So I was very intrigued by this, and I wanted to learn more. So I kept participating, and now I've served as the president of the Texas Council of Faculty Senates for, well, 3 years, coming up in May, and it's been quite a ride. During that time, I have been involved with all sorts of activities on my campus. I've had about 6 different university presidents, but I interact with universities across the states on a daily basis. I'm also a consultant to the Texas A&M University system. Visit other campuses and help with shared governance trainings there. And that's a bit about me. I can get into, I can offer my definitions of shared governance, basically the same ones. Let me go ahead and, but I'm going to add to that a bit. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. So yeah, I told you about the Texas Council of Faculty Senates, and our purpose is to develop faculty governance leadership and promote effective communication across faculty governance leaders and all sorts of constituencies like legislators and all sorts of policy implementers too, like the universities themselves. And we partner with the AAUP through the Texas chapter, and we also have a legislative arm through the Texas Association of College Teachers. So effective communication, I definitely agree with Bonnie. It's a very important, and we as an organization try to facilitate that across the state. Now, on to a little bit about my perspective on shared governance and who are the players really. But I got to tell you, full disclosure, little warning for some people, depending on where you're coming from and in your orientation. Most of what I have to say is grounded in these policy documents and reports. So who are the major players? What are the major components of university governance? Well, here we get to see the three major players as described by the AAUP. We have the governing board, which can take a lot of different names and across the states. I think maybe board of visitors or board of trustees, maybe the faculty and the administration of the institution. So here we have the distinguishing lines between faculty governance, administrative governance, and governing board governance. So you can kind of talk about these if you're having an elevator speech with someone in terms of our federal government, where there's a executive, judicial, and legislative body. Now they don't always align to like which is which is legislative, which is executive. There's some interplay there. You might think of the governing board more as judicial, though, the final say on how things are run, especially in the state of Texas. And that's important to understand what the laws are in your state. So the role of the governing board, let's learn about them. They're the final authority, like I was saying, in the United States for public universities. But I understand we probably have a lot of private universities, and I know less about the structures of private universities than I do public. The boards entrust the conduct of administration to the administrative officers, the presidents and the deans. And by the way, that definition of administrator really comes from the AAUP. The deans and up are considered the administrative governance body. And the administering of conduct of teaching and research to the faculty. That's what they're delegating. Role of administration, so deans and president, like I was saying, responsible for planning, organizing, and directing and representing the institution. So in this way, the president acts as CEO in most states and across most institutions. All right, the role of the faculty. This is so important. I'm going to come back to this. We got to know our role as faculty, and I don't assume that everybody here's faculty. I've invited administrators, by the way, because a key theme that I want to punctuate through repetition is shared governance is not a faculty issue. It's an everyone issue. So we, as faculty, have the primary responsibility for, and there's some repetition here, the curriculum, subject matter, and methods of instruction, research, faculty status, and aspects of student life which relate to the educational process. Now, all that's up for debate. What counts as curriculum? What counts as student life? Are we talking about faculty being involved with the construction and design of residence halls? Well, maybe. but these are issues to be determined on your campus. But we need to know our roles. And so briefly, that's what I've just shared with you. And in terms of what is shared governance, I really have nothing to deny in terms of what's been already shared. But let me just go ahead and for maybe repetition's sake, to describe what the AEP says in a boiled down fashion. It's a joint responsibility and joint effort of faculty, administrations, and governing boards to govern colleges and universities. There it is. And I'm really big on the elevator speech, because so often we find ourselves, if we're speaking as private citizens, talking to a legislator in his or her office, in their office, and they really want to get it boiled down to really what is it. And for the teachers in this session, you might understand how our students really see how we have credibility when we can really just speak it, live it, and explain it really succinctly, and can do it over and over again if they do catch you in the hallway. So, but that's according to the AAUP. What about the Association of Governing Boards? Now, if we anchored ourselves in the AAUP always, well, that's great, but sometimes when we're pitching the value of shared governance, we might forget about some of the other institutions that have endorsed the AAUP's policy documents and reports that are linking arms with the AAUP. And one of them is the Association of Governing Boards. So they say that it's a fundamental principle of inclusion in key areas of institutional responsibility and decision-making. All right, and that comes from their 2017 report on shared governance. This is something you can look up. So the AGB has their own reports, and even a separate report they did in 2019 that's plainly stated best practices in shared governance. I'm going to cover some of those things in other slides, but I'm going to take a pause here in a second. But it's good to have some perspective on what other organizations are saying about shared governance. And especially one of them is representing a key player, the governing board. All right, now I'm going to stop there and unshare my, here we go. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and yield, because I do want to be a good turn taker and allow for some discussion.
So, first of all, thank you both very, very much for sharing a little bit about how you became involved in shared governance and kind of your definitions and understandings of shared governance, how they operate in the state in which you are practicing shared governance. What I'd like to do now, I had a chance to look at everyone who registered for this session today and some of the questions that you all have. I know there's so many people here in this room. We're excited to have you. And I attempted to engage in a brief qualitative analysis and look for some themes. And so the first question that I have for both of our panelists, amid shifts to more corporate models in higher education, Joey did, after all, mention CEO as a concept. How can we encourage the practice of healthy shared governance in our university communities?
Bonnie, would you like to take the first shot at this since I just got done talking? I'm happy to jump in though.
Sure. I've seen, engagement with faculty kind of ebbs and flows, right? It's or waxes and wanes, however you're going to put it. And where they have become more and more engaged is when it affects not just the department or at the college level, but with mainly initiatives that have come out of our state government. That's where I think the times that I've seen faculty get most involved in shared governance is when it's something that the Tennessee General Assembly has proposed that would be have a negative impact on the university, and that's when the faculty senate president and other officers really have to kick it into gear and find out who they can align with. Often they can align if faculty think it's going to negatively impact them, it will in general negatively impact the university, period. So that's when you really start to communicate with and engage with your administration, and look at other universities in your state. For example, we have, I think Texas, you may, when you reached out to the whole of the country, you were focusing on organizations of universities within a given state. We have Tennessee University Faculty Senates, which has about 11 universities in it. And those groups, often they have less money than we may have at a faculty senate at an individual university, but they have more clout. They just sometimes don't utilize or even recognize how much clout they have. We've been able to not completely keep them off campus, but certainly limit guns on campus through working with these faculty senate consortium, the one we have in our state. Sometimes it depends on your state. We are not a union state, but we have a union. It's not recognized by our government in the state of Tennessee, but they're also voters, and there are a large number of them, and they'll go individually and independently to our General Assembly and tell them what they think. And our Tennessee legislatures are very conservative, generally will respond to these union members because they know they vote. So you have to build coalitions. That's extremely important. And the examples I had were all about different laws or bills that were proposed. Some became laws, some didn't. And it had to do with the coalitions, and we had to have a common goal, and we had to communicate. So if you can get people, bring people together and have successes in that way, it is hard from time to time. Things are going to slip. When things are going well, people don't necessarily want to be involved in faculty senate. And it's just when you get their passions up, when things are not going well, that you can get people to be more engaged.
All right. Amber, is it okay if I just jump in? All right, thanks. So to encourage the practice of healthy shared governance, I think I could just say a lot. I mean, I could just really fill up a lot of space here. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be selective. So one thing that I'll come back to is knowing our roles. And we shouldn't assume that boards and administrators know their roles or even what shared governance is. But we also don't want to be jerks about trying to assert ourselves. Something we need to do better at across a lot of institutions is building with social capital, being friends with administrators and governing boards when that's possible, instead of shutting them down immediately, those possibilities. But it is interesting how there's different worlds that are coming together, especially with the ever increasing corporatization of administrators, where we have a lot of administrators that never have been a faculty member. They've maybe been recruited or come up through finance offices or through enrollment management, or maybe from athletics, and maybe they have different skills and that are tapped into, but sometimes they find themselves having something to say about maybe curriculum at some point, maybe because their skills with auditing and producing reports and statistical analyses contribute to them being needed within this current climate of higher education. And that's not necessarily making them, bad people, but there's different worlds coming together. So first thing I'd say is it's understanding the divide there that needs to be bridged by idea sharing and gentle acclimation and enculturation to what the faculty sees as what higher education is at its best. Maybe what we are is different from what we are at its best, and getting those visions out there. And there's different types of organizational models, leadership models that seem to not work very well for shared governance. So going back about 100 years when, there was research that came out of like the Hawthorne studies, and regardless of what you think about the Hawthorne studies and those interpretations that led, we're talking about the Hawthorne effect and how people who are in work environments, how they maybe adjust their behavior based off of different environmental factors. Doesn't matter what really what those interpretations were or are now. Really, what proliferated at the time is what's important is this overall buy-in to how leaders need to really be focused on the feelings of the people that they're leading, and not necessarily their skills, but how they feel about the work they do and them being part of the organization. So that was really where we get this human relations approach that really hasn't left us, but we see, and you might see this in your own institutional memory, reflecting about how there might be emphasis, maybe more of a shared governance theater going on to just appease the faculty. Shared governance theater, like we're just going through the motions because it's pleasing. So we want to boost morale and improve climate, but are we really doing shared governance, or is it more of just a human relations approach? Now, if you're an administrator watching this, reflect also on like how that can be maybe embodied and constructed in the discussions that are had when faculty aren't around. Now, going from the human relations approach from like the 1920s, the 1950s and 60s and 70s really saw more of a turn towards human resources, understanding that leaders and organizations found that their organizations worked a whole lot better when they really took stock of people's abilities, their skills, their knowledge, and started to utilize them, not to pacify, but to really plug them in. And this is where I feel we have, we really need to encourage our organizational leaders to turn towards, to really seeing faculty as a resource, not as a hindrance, not as something to slow down work. In the slides you saw me almost get to, there's some misconceptions about faculty. And, some of those are that, or about shared governance, is that it's cumbersome, it takes too much time, it's inefficient, it leads to bad decisions, and that's unfortunate that some people have those perspectives. So I would say trying to get your institutions away from a human relations approach to more of a human resources approach, a team approach, really value the faculty. But then again, faculty need to know their roles as well and be willing to do the work. So I'll pause there, but I can gladly get into some of the slides too.
So a question that I had kind of gleaned from input from the registrants, and also that's here in a different form in the chat at the same exact time. I'll ask now, what challenges have you encountered in sustaining involvement in shared governance? Or more clearly put and articulated here in chat, what suggestions do you have for getting well-qualified faculty to step up and consider running for faculty senate in general, or faculty senate leadership? We are actually right in the middle in this moment of our nomination and election season, and we are encountering that today in this moment. So I would love to hear both Bonnie and Joey weigh in on that.
Yeah, that is a big challenge. I think you have to be mindful of the fact that this could impact positively or negatively someone's career. And for that reason, I would never advocate that assistant professors do it. And even if you're an associate professor, be careful. Make sure that you can still carry out your duties and move toward progressing to full professor if you take on this role. So that's one of the biggest challenges I see, to protect people's careers. I've run into people over the years. I think this guy was at LSU. Anyway, he'd been faculty senate president for God bless him 10 years. He was an English professor and he was writing a book about it. But I can't imagine anyone doing that. The other thing you have to make sure you do, there are plenty of faculty senates across the country that have 2-year terms, and that's it may take a year for you to get to know everybody and who you can figure out who you can work with, and who's someone that's more challenging to work with. So you have to consider things like that. What your institution is going to be unique. What are your needs? We went from having many meetings for the faculty senate president to working in a team situation with the past, current, and president-elect as a team to approach the work. And I think that has worked better here at this university than when the faculty senate president was strapped with attending 35 meetings a week and that kind of thing. So you just have to, and someone mentioned that they're changing their bylaws to hopefully give more benefits to the people who serve in those offices. But yeah, it's important from time to time, definitely review your bylaws and try to create a situation that's best for you and best for your institution, I should say.
Yeah, I found that trying to formalize those elements so that it's easier to then make deans and department heads aware of the responsibilities that you have. But Bonnie, I think you raised a really good point. Maybe one that I'm learning now as a faculty senate president. You know, you might be told that this kind of role will be great for your career, and whether it is actually, you know, all up for debate, right? To a degree. And so I know that I would say that being faculty senate president is the greatest leadership training that I have ever been involved in.
I would agree with you. It's the 360 view. You get an opportunity to see how things are made, and it's eye-opening. Honestly, you wish every faculty member could have at least some of that, and they'd better understand their role and how the university functions and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Joey, what's your perspective here?
Well, I echo that it can be frustrating that well, when a faculty member comes in, they can hear some lovely speeches about how contributing to and participating in faculty governance as part of maybe shared governance is thrown in there, maybe not, but just participating in faculty senate or assembly is a great way to contribute and to advance one's career. It doesn't always play out that way across campuses, in that we do see a lot of faculty getting tapped for leadership positions that really haven't participated in faculty governance much at all, or mostly in just kind of ornamental ways for their CV. So that's a frustration. The attitudes that I was talking about earlier, that represents some of the biggest barriers, are these misconceptions that working with faculty and some administrators that buy in is cumbersome, and that results suffer. Yeah, this idea that a camel is a horse made by a committee is a fun and funny anecdote, but it hurts when it's left faculty outside of conversations. And but there's faculty, we have our own misconceptions about shared governance, that one, it's equal rights to governance, and that there's democracy for every decision. Something that someone who's attending this talk, they should understand, is that there's different levels of responsibility. And so there's you can think of it as terms of dance partners. In some ways, in some decisions, the faculty is taking the lead, and in some ways we are not. But figuring out the best ways to interpret the principles that guide shared governance, that help us with this joint effort and collaborative decision making, is something that needs to be negotiated and renegotiated in practice by how we interact in our meetings, but also the policies we create and how we communicate. By the way, I'm a professor of an associate professor of communication studies, and I failed to mention that. But as I was saying, it takes a variety of different forms, so that we have principles, but how it actually gets lived and played on your campuses can be very unique, and that uniqueness can be a great thing. Speaking to some of the other challenges I see, is that in general, I see that there's varying environments that support shared governance, and varying levels of knowledge about shared governance, especially with faculty. And I'm just going to speak about the faculty and how their knowledge and how they view or see the value of the knowledge of shared governance interacts with whether or not they see the value, but also how administrators, administrators can embody and construct environments that are supportive or not supportive for shared governance. And with this, I'm going to go ahead and I've modified let me get the laser pointer function going here. I modified a model that you can find in a 2010 book, How Learning Works. It really synthesizes the motivation research. And I've modified this to really speak to faculty and how I see us relating to shared governance in these different environments. So when an environment is not supportive, or if it's supportive, whether it's supportive or not supportive, if you don't see the value in either sense, you're going to likely reject participating in shared governance if you just don't see the value. You just don't, it's not worth it. Maybe it's, and why don't you see the value? Maybe you don't understand fully what it is. Maybe you've seen it go badly and you've been burned, and so you're just going to reject getting involved. But let's just say that you do see the value, but but your knowledge of shared governance is low. you're either going to be hopeless if you see the value. You're going to want to get involved with and help out with shared governance. But if the climate's not there, you're really going to slink away and feel like there's just there's no hope in getting involved. But if the environment is supportive, but you still don't know much about shared governance, you're probably going to feel a little bit fragile. You're going to see that shared governance is a good thing, but you don't know how exactly to participate. If you don't see the value, but let's just go with the people who have a lot of shared governance knowledge. If it's not supported by your environment, and you don't see the value, you're going to evade. You're going to hide out in your office, and you've learned about it, or maybe you're attending this workshop or this panel, and you're getting good definitions, but you still just don't see the value, and your environment's not supportive. You're likely going to evade. But also, even if it is supportive, you're going to likely evade too if you just don't see the value. So it does really require people around you helping you to see the value. And I will say that let me just talk straight to you guys right now. Shared governance is linked to so much. I mean, we're talking about tenure and promotion. We're talking about academic freedom. We're talking about free speech, intramural and extramural speech. To me, this is not just a higher education issue. It's a national security issue. I'll say that again. This is a national security issue. Having healthy higher education in the United States of America is a national security issue. Check out the white paper on threats to democracy from the White House. There are key items on there that really speak to what we do as educators, helping people defend themselves through information literacy, being able to defend themselves against lies and other threats, but also being participants in democracy really those seeds are sown in our environments that we cultivate. So just to pause here, I want you to see the value. If you're here right now, I want you to see that you play an important role in not just the health of your institution, but of your country and perhaps the world. All right, so if the environment's not supportive, if you do see the value, and if you do see the value, but it's not supportive, you're going to feel a bit defiant. You're going to like have your fist in the air, kind of. I'm going to perhaps want to engage in shared governance, but maybe you're not doing it effectively. Maybe the pathways aren't there for you to actually, and the structures, the policies. Maybe your faculty senate was dissolved, but you're going to be defiant. Let's just go to what we're aiming for here is motivated. We want to see the value in being in a supportive environment and have higher knowledge of shared governance. And hopefully be around people that are motivated as well. I mean, there's little work that can be done if you're just one motivated person on your campus. It can be very sad and very lonely. I'm going to go ahead and pause there and stop sharing. I got to remember to click that.
Yeah, great points. One great point that I saw in the chat that I wanted to share and highlight here was from Joe Marola. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the last name properly, who says, I think our biggest problem is that faculty are being called upon to do so much service that they are being pulled away from their teaching and scholarship activities and either get totally burnt out or don't want to do any service anymore. This is especially a problem with women and minority, faculty who are asked to serve on so many committees that need a diversity advocate. So that idea of invisible and emotional labor as well. And then a second point and question as well. We do seem to be operating in a moment and a climate in terms of the work of faculty senate and shared governance is being devalued and deemed inconsequential in decision making. So not only are the people that we're tapping on the shoulder just to say, please come participate in shared governance, we really want your voice here, but that person perhaps is engaged in too heavy of a service workload, and oftentimes participation in Senate is undercompensated in terms of that workload. But then in some university communities, it is a devalued space, right? So, wow, that actually seems like the beginning of a part 2 of this conversation, Gwen. And I know that we're coming up on our hour. What I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and to ask our 2 speakers if they have any final thoughts around those 2 points.
Bonnie, feel free to jump in. I just got done. I'll yield to you. Okay. Okay. You unmuted. All right. All right. So I can go a couple different ways. I know I've read in your comments here that y'all wanted some best practices. You guys want to end on best practices for shared governance? Okay. Let me go and I'm going to share some slides again. I hope you're not getting fatigued by slides. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take this, scroll down some best practices. We've got best practices from different perspectives. Here's the University of Texas. Their white paper from 2016 was not approved by their administration to send on to the Board of Regents. So this is not necessarily controversial. It just didn't get institutionalized at the system level, but let's go for it. Faculty governance org should implement and maintain policies that establish secure and clearly define the role of the institution's faculty governance organization and overall institutional governance. The faculty governance organization should consider establishing a separate shared governance board to really be able to assess shared governance on that campus and just be a board that deals with that only. Should develop and maintain faculty governance websites. So your faculty governance organization, your Senate, should develop their own websites and maintain them. Number 4, administration should provide financial support, including protected time for faculty governance organization leaders and designated space for the organization to improve efficiency of communication and transparency. Number 5, assess shared governance. We need to do that annually, and that's a hard thing to pitch to some administrators, but it's good to assess annually so that in times of good or bad, we can get to know the trends and know where we're at. Number 6, regular review of internal compliance with policies, especially with tenure and promotion. Sorry for the typo. Number 7, create clear faculty appeal and grievance policies through shared governance practices. That's a big one. When there's no justice, how can there be shared governance? Number 8, faculty governance should be involved in strategic planning. Number 9, president should always seek input from faculty on issues that impact faculty. Number 10, all higher administrators should be evaluated annually by faculty. So not necessarily, so we do a lot of reports show that chairs and deans are evaluated. They should be evaluated, but upper administrators should be evaluated by faculty. Number 11, conduct climate surveys. There's 12 of these, by the way. Conduct climate surveys among faculty and administration within the first 90 days of a new president. there should be, number 12, there should be a mechanism for administrators to bring issues or problems to the system level administration. All right. Now, according to the Association of Governing Boards, I got 5 more. Are you guys all right? No? Stop.
So Joey is now our teaser for our next gathering that we are all going to do, which
right.
is the meeting. Our annual meeting will be in June at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. We'll remind you of all this next week. Hopefully with permission from Bonnie and Joey, we will be able to have their slide deck also on our website, which we will put in with the recording. Thank you, especially to Bonnie, Joey, Amber, and the Communications Committee for putting this together. Thank you all for coming and doing the really, really hard work of shared governance. And I will let you get off to the next thing that you need to do today. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Amber, Bonnie. Appreciate
Joey,
it.
that
Thanks,
was a
everybody.
that was a great list. And actually, I would encourage everybody to look at your sentence and which of those are you doing and which are you not doing, which have you not thought about. That's a great list.
Thanks, Bonnie.
This
Appreciate
feels
it.
like the start of a conversation.
Absolutely.
What webinars needed. Thank you all very, very
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.